Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is Peter Lavelle, co-founder of The Gaggle, host also of RT's talk show Crosstalk. So, as the old saying has it, there are no coincidences. And the sudden upsurge of activity by and on behalf of Alexey Navalny and the arrival of the Biden administration to power in Washington, D.C., coming at the same time is indeed no coincidence. The Biden people, who are mostly the Obama people, are wedded to the idea of regime change. They tried this back in the Obama days, when we had the demonstrations, the 2010, 2011 demonstrations, and indeed, they are very much targeting Putin, whom they loathe with a passion for removal. And they see Navalny as a key ingredient of this strategy. We've got to understand how this strategy works, and because it's part of what color revolutions are about. It's not about let's organize a political party, let's run in elections, let's build a majority in parliament, vote against legislation, or run against some leader we don't like, if an election and so on. It's about staging events that the media, the Western media, of course, can then present as examples of horrific dictatorial, fascist, Stalinist, neo-Nazi, you name it, rule on the part of the targeted leader. And this is indeed what Navalny is about. His mode is to stage protests that are not sanctioned by the authorities. And then, of course, the police in Russia do what police do in every other country when confronted with an unsanctioned protest, they break it up. Now, sometimes when they break up these demonstrations, it leads to violence. And it is this violence that can then be presented in the Western media as a sign that Putin's grip on power is getting more and more tenuous. And more sinister aspect of it is that there is a hope that it would provoke some very unpleasant incident, maybe some children getting killed, and maybe some women battered and whatever, and then this horrific images of blood and dead bodies can be used as a very powerful propaganda weapon against Putin. And I think this is what we've been witnessing since Navalny's surprising return to Russia, coinciding with Biden coming to power. So, Peter, what's your take?
Well, very good description. The only thing I would add is that, by creating these illegal protests and demonstrations and getting Western media coverage, there's a hope that you'll be able to pick off one of the pillars of power, like the police or the military. I mean, look what we had in Venezuela. They were trying to get the military to abandon Maduro. Okay, we saw that in the early days of the international proxy war against the government in Assad. I think you remember very clearly that I think it was one or two pilots defected, and this is the tipping point, okay? And so that's what they're always looking for. Well, that's simply not going to work in Russia, not at all here. The unfortunate things for the people playing this forced regime change playbook in Washington and other Western capitals is that Navalny ain't your man to do it, okay? Because he is a known quantity for many different things here, many different things. At one point he was a gross nationalist. I mean, in a really piggish way, okay? Calling migrant workers from the Caucasus cockroaches and things like that. The same kind of playbook we've heard from demagogues in the past. And then he would get on board. He would buy a small number of, maybe just one stock in a company, and he would have some kind of shareholder rights, and he would be basically try to extort and intimidate a company management until he got what he wanted. He has been convicted of fraud, and that's why he was put in prison, because when he left the country, when he came back, he broke his probation. Okay, I mean, you're going to do it to Assange. Yeah, so I guess they should do it to Navalny. Yeah, okay. And then then he just basically embraced the West as as some kind of power source for him. I mean, I've asked many Russians about him over the years. Some people appreciate what he does because of the anti-corruption. There's a long history of corruption in Russia. I would say it's getting less and less. And there are those that like his message but don't like him. Okay, and that's the latter category is quite common. Some of the things he says is kind of makes sense, but he's overexcited, he's self-absorbed, he's very narcissistic. He's certainly in love with himself on the stage. Okay, and if this were someone that he just came out of the blue and had a message that people say, yeah, that makes sense, but no, it's a messenger that they've gotten kind of used to. Most people don't talk about him. His popularity, if you want to call it that, is minuscule, if not nonsensical for people. But he looks to the West. He has a hard time trying to make his case because he changes it so much. He's basically a liberal now, which of course our audience needs to understand that many liberals in Russia, particularly in the major cities, are racist. They don't like the people from the South, people that actually do the work. And these people are documented, they're paid, it's very well regulated. No one wants to be caught without papers in Russia, believe me. Okay, so Navalny is a Western construct, and a lot of people know it. They say, he's the West's man, he's Washington's man. And you're right, there's no such thing as coincidences here. I mean, I can't get my head around the fact that he claims to have been poisoned. He was allowed to leave the country. He goes to Germany. He is treated in Germany. German physicians never released to the public any forensic evidence backing up any kind of claim. And then there's some kind of interface with those physicians with MI6 and the CIA. Right. Why? Well, I thought the physicians, they're the ones that do the blood work and all of that.
That's exactly it. He has this thing, he's poison, and there's the Western media are running with the story, oh, Putin is trying to murder him, claiming that they have direct evidence that Putin ordered his murder. And there were lots of cries that he must be granted asylum. Germany must grant him asylum. United States must grant him asylum. Now he's suddenly returning. Now, if you've just been the victim of an assassination attempt ordered by no less a person than the president, you don't return. And of course, he's done these publicity stunts by suggesting when he was sentenced to 30 days in prison for violating his probation terms, he said, I am not suicidal. So don't believe any stories that will come out that saying I committed suicide. Well, nobody would have believed he committed suicide if you're sentenced to 30 days. I mean, no one's going to say, oh, well, he committed suicide because he can't take 30 days. So it was again, a publicity stunt, a gimmick. And as you say, the Russians are used to these kinds of gimmicks from him because, he does reinvent himself and in every time. So as you said, he was before a nationalist. Now he's a kind of a pro-Western liberal, and basically, he does not want to do the hard work that is involved in creating a political party and creating a political movement. It's much easier to stage these media events. I mean, that's easy.
Well, if you look at the history of opposition, and when I mean opposition to the current political status quo and the current political establishment, there've been plenty of people over the last 20 years, even going back into the 1990s. And what plagues them is that they're all the leaders are narcissistic, self-centered. It's always about them. Okay, it's not about a platform and trying to convince people to join their cause, because their cause is always secondary to what they want power for themselves. Okay, so it's really quite hollow, and it's very, very transparent as well. And if you look at I don't spend a lot of time on it because I back in the 2010, 11, when they had the Bolotnaya, that's a square in Moscow, in the center. I attended a couple of them. I just wanted to see who was there. And it was just a motley crowd. It was Stalinist, trade unionist, Leninist, eco fanatics, just a mishmash of everything. And everyone has a right to protest. That's fine. I have no problem with that. And I wanted to go see people practicing, exercising their right, okay? But what my sense is, my personal experience with all this, is that most of the people that like him, the few that do not know anything about the Soviet Union, don't know anything about the 90s. Maybe they were little tots during the 1990s. And so it's strikingly younger people, and I think they're being sold a bill of goods that doesn't exist. See, the vast majority, particularly adults, people I know very well that over the years, they remember the breakup, they remember the trauma of the 1990s, and they see what's happened in the last 20 years. On the whole, very much on the whole, people say the country's going in the right direction. Because what most people don't understand outside of Russia, Russians prize stability. Stability is the most important thing. And to this day, and I'm not saying it's a good thing, but to this day, politics remains a dirty thing. Because it's about people, ambitions, it's about greed, it's about a power grab, and people just say, we went through this, it's awful, we're not going to go through it again.
I think that's exactly right, because when you think of it, that for them, they say this instability that gave rise to 1917 and the Bolshevik seizure of power. We had 75 years of communist rule. And then, lo and behold, that comes to an end. And then we have the decade of the rule by the oligarchs. And that's why instability is just an absolute, no-no. And it's not dissimilar to Germany. I mean, Germany is one of those boringly stable countries in the world. I mean, there's hardly any change in government. I mean, Merkel has been there almost as long as Putin.
Like Bismarck.
Helmut Kohl, I think before her, he was there also forever. I mean,
Adenauer was there forever.
Exactly. This is a country that absolutely categorically said no experiments, no changes, nothing at all must disturb order, because they just know what happens when you have instability. You have the worst, most horrible nightmares.
Let me give you an example of a social movement that got what it wanted, and I don't think was ever repeated in the press. In the late, I don't remember the year, it was like 1999 or like 2000, up to 2001, that time frame, turn of the century. And the mayor of Moscow at the time was Yuri Lushkov. And up until that time, all local landline calls were free. And so he said, but on January 1st, we're going to start charging for local calls. And it was what we call in Russia, babushki, the grandmothers. They said, no, 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 no. It's how we communicate with the outside world. They're hanging on the phone, talking to their friends, okay? And they came out and they protested, and they were loud, and they called TV stations, they wrote newspapers, and they demonstrated. And when you see these elderly women, and everyone know, if you lived here, you know exactly what the image I have in my mind. You don't want to mess with those people, George. You just don't want to mess with them. And it was revoked. It was revoked. See, you can enact change here, but you have people with agency, a real issue, okay, and they had the fortitude to face down power. Now that is a perfect strategy. Okay, you have all of the elements you need to go into political battle, as it were. Navalny, he's going into battle with CNN, and that doesn't cut it here.
Well, I think that's right. And I think that's why Putin, whenever he's asked about Navalny, he says the same thing. I'm all for opposition, but I kind of like constructive opposition. I know, people who want to create something, want to build something. I mean, we get Navalny doesn't like Putin. He wants Putin gone. He wants united Russia gone. But what's his agenda? If it's the agenda is like, well, let's have a kind of Western style government. Then people, we remember the 90s. In other words, we bring back the oligarchs, bring back kind of the rapacious capitalists from the West, or the Bill Browders and the rest of them coming back. No one wants that. So you know he's kind of stuck with this position of yeah, well, we want to bring back you know Western style liberal democracy, which nobody wants. Hence, the only thing you can do is just staging these these.
Well, the thing that is just, you know, it's missed. People, I mean, smart people should know it, but they won't say it, is that who attacked Parliament? Boris Yeltsin. After the attack on democracy, who rewrote the Constitution? Yeltsin. Okay. I mean, and then all of the time Putin has been in power, it's essentially been exactly the same Constitution. Okay, it's tinkering on the sides. It's tinkering because that's what people want. No radical changes, because we know what that means. And you know, I really want to stress here. You bring up the Bolsheviks here. I mean, if you look at the collective memory of people going back to their parents or grandparents, great grandparents, this is nirvana now. Okay, right. Russians can leave if they want. They can travel where they want. They can earn money. They can spend money. I mean, this has never happened in Russian history for a majority experience, okay? So many people that should know better. And every once in a while it happens, you know, I meet with a Western correspondent journalist or something like that, and, you know, and they go with the same mantra, but I'll just say, how many years have you been here? 5, okay. And you can't say it's gotten better at all? Well, yeah. And compared to Detroit or Portland, Oregon.
But again, you have to think back also for them, the 1990s, the people who remember the 1990s, and obviously now it's already an older generation, but for the people who remember the 1990s, that was a lot worse than what they replaced. In other words, it was all the sort of endless denunciations of the communists, Brezhnev, the era of stagnation, and the
Chernobyl,
the privileged elite who live there. But then look back on the 1990s, that was a lot worse, because at least under Brezhnev and you know his immediate successors, you know there was stability. You know, people had jobs, people had a means of earning a living. What came then was, you know, yeah, you had the babushkas eating out of the trash cans. You had people with no homes, nothing. So, you know, so therefore that whole Navalny mindset of kind of, oh, well, let's just attack the ruling elite for their corruption and their privileges, and then we'll just have something better. No, I mean they've gone through the 90s and they know it's going to be a lot worse.
Well, I mean, it was a few years ago on Study Audubon. I was going down the street and there were these young kids. They were supporting Navalny, and they had written on their chest, "Hug me," in English. I was like, what? And of course, it was for cameras. It was for, you know, there was some, you know, Western journalist standing there with a camera, you know, oh, look how people are embracing, you know, and these are just young kids. And I remember just giving one of them a dirty look. It's just like, you have no idea what you're doing here. Okay, and since young people are being brought up here, I'll tell you, what people are talking about, George. It's not about Navalny. People simply don't care. But what they do care about is some of these protesters bringing out small children, okay, and looking for a fight. Okay, and they have children as some kind of buffer, okay? And that is just unconscionable. It shows you, as you've just rightly pointed out over and over again, they don't have an agenda, they just have virtue signaling.
Right, that's right. What is interesting, and this is kind of a segue, is also that when Putin addressed the World Economic Forum at Davos, he did it online, he was addressing very, very serious issues, while the Western media was obsessing about Navalny. But he actually said, look, this globalization movement that we're living through, it's a really problematic, because almost everybody is losing out. And you can't go on keeping a system going in which people are losing out, and therefore only the privileged elite is gaining something. Now, this is what he had said, and said, and he, you know, this whole thing about, for instance, he brought up the the New START agreement. He said, okay, that's a good first step, but there's a real danger what's going on in the world at the moment. And he said, it could well be we're in this situation of the 1930s, heading towards an almighty clash. Very, very serious issues that he raised. And instead of the media giving a proper account of it, they obsessed about Navalny. Why didn't Putin talk about Navalny? What about Navalny? What about? I mean, it's the coverage is just a joke.
Yeah. The Kurds.
Right, exactly.
No, you're absolutely right. And what is Putin said this when he was at the Munich Security Conference. I think it was 2008, wasn't it?
2007.
Seventh, right? And he warned about what was happening with the international system. He ended up being prophetic here. See, one of the things I'm going to be doing later in this week, I'm going to do a program on China on Crosstalk. And what's really interesting here, and Putin said it, but in different words. But what he said when he was addressing the Davos crowd, essentially, is that the threats to the international system are not what you think they are. Okay, because the United States wants to rearm and upgrade its nuclear deterrent. They want to create an Asia NATO and things like that. Why? Because there are threats? No, but because American hegemony in the world is diminishing with every passing day. And when you see your hegemonic rule slipping away, you will react and lash out. I mean, we've talked about Navalny here. Well, Navalny is akin to who? Saakashvili, akin to Juan Guaido, okay, where they're trying to pick their surrogates. But see, what that does is it destabilizes, because it should be about states to states, okay, not about states undermining others, okay? I mean, what would have happened if Putin had arrived in Portland, okay, during the summer, okay, or the Chinese, wanting a national security, a Security Council emergency meeting over what's going on in Chaz or Chop, okay? But see, and this is what Putin and the Chinese and others are saying is that why do you extend your why are you constantly pushing what you believe are values, which they're not, they're just cudgels, okay, to force upon other people? It destabilizes the international system.
It does indeed, and that's you raise a very good point. I mean, we of course know about Victoria Nuland, now number 3 in the State Department, and her activities in Kiev, that on Maidan, when she came out to hand out cookies to the protesters. But during last week's protest of Navalny, the US Embassy, under the guise of helping American visitors not to go to the scenes of the protest, offered a list of where the protests are going to take place. So at 12 p.m., there will be a protest here. Do not go there. At 3 p.m., this is where it will take place. Do not go there. Then 4 p.m., then you'll be here. Do not go there. Now, Russians are not stupid, and they said, and they protested about this. I said, we know exactly what you're doing. But this is the way the United States operates. And again, they kind of assume everybody's stupid and they can afford.
That's right. Well, I mean, what would have happened if the Russian embassy in Washington had said that there's going to be a protest on Capitol Hill on January 6th?
Exactly.
Oh my God!
That's right.
Everyone's hair would be on fire.
Do not go to January the Capitol Hill. There will be a protest there.
Now, you're so right. I mean, it's really kind of hard to find words how they have. These people that are pulling the strings for regime change, they just have such a dim opinion of the people they're trying to help, They just have such a, I mean, Elliot Abrams, he's put at the desk for Venezuela, and then he's given the Iran portfolio. I mean, it's insulting to intelligence. I mean, the guy was convicted of a felony, okay? And then he gets resurrected like that because he's on message, okay? And it really destabilizes the international order. Why don't we just, and I've said this over and over again, And I like to say this to Blinken and his motley crew: why don't you just observe international law? Maybe things will be a little different.
That's right. And really, when you go to Blinken and the American government, don't you have enough problems to be going on with? You've got you've got this pandemic. You've got the economy has lost about a third of its value. You have seething rage within the country over the last election. You have growing inequality. You have a chaos at the border. I would have thought you have enough on your plate to worry about Navalny. But I guess that's the way ruling elites operate. It's the shiny object. Don't pay attention to our problems. Look what's happening in Moscow.
Well, as I've said before, when the empire finally comes to an end, the last people that will find out about it will be American citizens, because the media won't tell you anything that's going on. My goodness, worrying about the fate of Mr. Navalny, who wants to be filmed being arrested by the police, wants to be filmed in chaotic circumstances, which he creates or helps create. And they're opening up the border, okay? And what happens to low-income jobs? No, it's like, look over here and not at the border.
That's it. And the media always goes along with it. They always play this game. Hey, forget all that. Look what Russia is doing. And there we are. And suddenly we're all talking about Russia. And Michael McFaul is on hand to lend his quote expertise unquote about what's going on.
Pontificate. Yes. Okay. No. Yeah. That's exactly it here. And as we've mentioned before, and I think you were on Crosstalk when we discussed it, this issue is that the Russiagate hoax, unfortunately, has bled into policy. When Biden, when there was the readout of the Biden-Putin call, he's asking about the bounty story. Yes. I mean, I wonder what Putin is thinking with these people. What?
Yeah.
I'm sure Putin in his head saying, I know you do this for domestic political reasons, okay? And now it's seeping into your foreign policy? Really?
Right. Yeah.
So if Joe Biden believes the bounty story, is he committed to arms control? I mean,
no. I mean,
it's a fair question.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, the bounty story. You remember how people used to make jokes about the Soviet Union when they'd say, "Oh, whenever we point something out, about what the Soviets are doing in Hungary or in Czechoslovakia, they come back to us and say, "Oh, what about lynchings in the South?" And this used to be a good joke, but this applies to America. Oh, what about the bounties? What bounties? Where's the evidence for that?
Well, all I can say, George, we can end this. I'm really glad that the flat Earth conspiracy theory didn't seep into Russiagate, because then Biden would be talking about the flat Earth, okay? After he talked about arms control.
That's it.
The good thing is, it gives the gaggle a lot to talk about, George.
Exactly. All right, so we will, of course, be maintaining our laser-like focus on the Biden administration and its attitude toward Russia. And remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.